Hi, y'all. Welcome to the last episode of this season, which was season 5. Season 5 was literally titled by me, Why the Fuck Do I Do What I Do season? And I learned a lot, and I hope you learned a lot. And I think self-homework and self-reflection, just being mindful, I think is so important for so many of us in any part of our life, whether you're married, single, a student, a stay-at-home mom, first responder, like what have you, like just whatever you do out there. I think it's important to understand why your heart does what it does and why you make the decisions that you make. And I think self-homework and self-study are huge. Okay, so this season, I wanted to talk about physical attractiveness, and I wanted to talk about proximity, reciprocity, similarity, and familiarity. So I already talked about physical attractiveness, and I talked about how I like beards and tattoos and blue eyes, and just like the guy who works out, a gym owner, bodybuilder, first responder, military guy, whatever. Like I just love that like physical outward appearance. I found out that some of that has to do with some of the learned behavior that I had, from my natural father, because he had a beard, right? So, and he loved to work out. And I think that those are some of those things that for me, it was like a learned behavior, and not going to go into it, but it was, a vivid memory that I had that was happy, and one of the few I had, and it was around bodybuilding. So I think for me, I'm always going to find that attractive. I'm always going to find somebody who works out attractive because it just reminds me of my father and the one good memory I have of him, right? So proximity was fascinating to me because proximity was just really about like the more that you spend time with somebody, right? It's not necessarily like a long distance relationship or like a close distance relationship. It's just more like proximity, right? Like we all know, like my favorite thing is like sitting on the same bench, with a couple side by side. And that's just being near, having things in common. It's like proximal, like you just have things that you find in common, and proximity is important. And I think that was an interesting topic to discuss. I already know that I'm kind of like a PDA person. Like I already know that I love like physical touch, and I don't know if I totally still believe in like all the love languages, because I feel like I identify with a lot of them and then none of them, if that makes any sense. But proximity is definitely interesting to discuss with your friends and family, and mine's all about like PDA and touch and like forehead kisses and the whole bit. Reciprocity is something that I found fascinating just to discuss and learn about, because I think that reciprocity is important, right? Because you don't want to put like your heart and your energy into someone who's not interested in you. Like you want that same reciprocal love back, right? So reciprocity is important, but it could also be negative. Like as I referenced to, I love to give like CG when we were together, I love to give him like massages, and he sleeps so peacefully and he looks so cute, and I love to do it. But then we got to a certain point where I felt like he was like, okay, I'm ready for a massage. And it doesn't mean that he wasn't grateful, but it just means that it's just something you have to be aware of, right? Because you don't want to ever feel like your good gestures or good deeds are taken advantage of, right? Okay, so reciprocity can go either way, but fascinating to discuss, I think, with any relationship. Similarity, I like quite a bit because it ties into familiarity, which is the last topic I'm going to talk about. But similarity to me is really just about like your likes and your taste and what your partner's likes and taste are, right? Or your coworker. Like I talked about a lot, like how in this episode, like my coworkers, I always like joke, they're all male. They're all like, we're all in the army. We're all recruiters. We all work in this like tiny office. We spend a lot of time together. We spend like all the hours together. And I'm always kind of like, they're like my bad husbands, because we spend so much time together. But it's interesting because if you spend a lot of time with someone, you're going to morph into somewhat of what they like and dislike, because you need to get along, right? Like you need to have like good work relationships, you need to have good like friend relationships and relationships, and just, I don't know, similarity is important, right? Because you find things that are similar within one another. Okay, so this brings me to familiarity. And familiarity is the last topic that I wanted to talk about of like this season of self-study and self-homework of why I do, and why the fuck do I do the things that I do, right? I learned a lot about myself, and life is fucking awesome, and it's crazy. Like today is January 1st, and I'm at a point in my life right now, like today, where I didn't think I would be this point of this year, right? So obviously I shared a lot of my life with you guys, and CG and I broke up, and I was like fucking devastated. And then I tried dating and I just couldn't connect with people. And it's interesting because when I started this journey with this podcast, I wanted to make you guys laugh. I wanted you guys to know that I was here. Like, I never wanted any veteran to ever feel lonely in any way. Like, I wanted, to make sure that you could connect with me if you needed to. So for me, this was really just about human connection, right? For me, and then for you, right? The listener. And this year just ended up in a place where I wasn't expecting, and I'm really very happy that it ended up where it is. But familiarity. So when you are going on a date, or you're spending time with like a coworker, like I've referenced earlier, or just with your friends and families, familiarity is obviously one of those things that we look for with people within human connection, right? Because in some way we're always trying to connect. So you find familiar qualities, right? You find familiar aspects. You have like good memories. You share moments together, right? If you are someone who's dated me in the past and you've gone on a date with me, 9 times out of 10, we're just friends at this point because we didn't connect romantically. But that's okay, because there's a handful of you out there that I'm so glad you're in my life. We just couldn't connect, right? We didn't have that spark. We didn't have that magic. We didn't have the familiarity, right? So familiarity for me is fascinating because I'll share a date with you, of course, but also because it allowed me to reconnect with CG, right? Okay, so familiarity. So I, as you know, like we broke up, CG and I broke up. He was number 69. I went out on first date 70, and I went on date 71, and then I went on date 72, and then I ended up on date 73. So 73, great guy. Met him on a dating app. What's really funny about him is it took us forever to like actually meet in person, which is so odd because, as I've mentioned before, all of my first dates, most of my first dates, lived just so fucking far from me, right? So I would like plan weekends out to like connect with people because like we fucking lived on different parts of the country, right? So what's awesome to me is this particular guy, younger than me, which is fine because obviously that's what I'm drawn to. And I think a lot of that's just like my maturity, hopefully my playfulness, but I think a lot of it is just I'm kind of immature, right? So I relate to people younger than me. Anyway, so he's divorced. He has a couple kids. He's 40. I thought he was really cute. He didn't have blue eyes, but he had brown eyes. But other than that, everything else, like, he matched, you know what I mean? Like pun intended, but he like matched, like he had the physical attributes, right? So anyway, so we started talking. He lives like fucking 5 miles from me, which is crazy because you would feel like, or you would think, since I spent a good amount of my dating journey, like traveling and flying and driving to meet people, wouldn't you think it'd be kind of cool if I actually matched with somebody that I liked that lived like 5 minutes from me? And it was kind of cool, but it just didn't work out, but he's a good guy, right? So anyway, so it took us a little while to connect. He was really funny. So very funny over, the dating app. And then of course, went from dating app to texting and then to phone calls, and then we met in person. So the guy's fucking funny. I'm not going to go into too much detail about him, but he's kind of well off, but he's done really well for himself as far as like saving and budgeting. And we talked about that a lot because that's like something I'm really focused on in 2023. I'm happy with where my credit score is. I feel like I could have less credit card debt, but I'm on my way and I'm like really excited. So he and I talked about that kind of a lot, like over text and on the phone. And then we met in person. We talked about it a little bit more because I feel like if you're going to be friends with somebody or you're going to date with somebody, it's good to have like some honesty, right? So, I mean, it's not like I gave him my social or checking account or anything like that, but I was just talking about how like, yeah, I've made money in my life. This is what I've done with some of it. This is where I'm at today. I mean, I'm fucking 51. Like, I really need to like figure out my finances because it's time for me to be responsible enough to actually take care of myself when I retire. Like, I'm on track to retire in 2031. I love the Army. I don't love recruiting, but I've accepted my fate at this point. So I'm doing the best that I can, because I do love the Army and it's my mission. And I'm just going to drive on and do the best I can until 2031 because I want to retire. Like, I want to live like I mentioned it before. I want to retire. I want to end up in Italy. I have this like vision of myself, like eating cheese on a mountain, just fucking awesome. I can't wait. Anyway, So he and I, we chatted a lot. We talked about my finances quite a bit. We talked about, ways that he could help me. When I went on my last date before him, it was like early in the morning, and I like backed out of my little driveway. And I don't know how this happened, but I like backed out. Like I had my Jeep packed, like I was with me. I had coffee. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but when I backed out of the driveway, which I had backed out of a gazillion times before, since I, moved to this place in August and it's now fucking, January, but then it was December, but whatever. I fucking backed out, and somehow in slow motion, I was like, no. And sure enough, like the right side of my Jeep somehow just like hit the back or the front side of like this little fence gate I have into by my front door, my porch. And I was like, fuck, because like the wood just like fucking exploded. And I was like, no. So I parked the Jeep and I saw all in slow motion. And sure enough, like the wood like split and exploded. And I was like, fuck, So anyway, I was kind of late. So I left. And then I asked one of the recruiters when they had time to take pictures of the fence or gate thing. And they did. And I was like, holy shit, I think I can fix it, but I fucked it up. And I don't have tools, right? So anyway, so first day 73, I was like, hey, yeah, so I don't know, if you're like a handy guy, me trying to flirt in my awkward way. I was like, but somehow my Jeep hit the back of my fucking fence thing, and I was wondering if you knew anybody who could fix it. So of course we were talking, and he was like, well, I didn't want to brag or anything, but I have a fucking like a master's degree in mechanical engineering, and I can fucking over engineer that fucking thing, and I can fix it for you. And I was like, it'd be fucking awesome. But the weather was like cold and icy, and we're like, we'll go ahead and wait. Anyway, so we got along really well. We joked about things about like how clumsy I am. We talked about our exes. We talked about like the kids that he had, and then we just talked about just like life in general. It got along really well. And there were several times where, because my work schedule is always my work schedule. Most of the time I get off at 7, sometimes it's earlier, sometimes it's later. So for the most part, even though he's 5, minutes away, I was just like, I don't know if we can meet on this particular day, but we'll try. And he was a really great sport, because every time I tried to meet, something would happen, and I was like, I just can't do it. Or if it was a weekend, I was like, oh my God, I have plans. Not that I have plans very often, but it just worked out where like I could not meet him. So he never gave up. He was very persistent. And then we finally met, and it was a good connection. I don't think it would have ended up being a long-term connection, just because we're both at different points in our life. He'd been divorced for a year. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but he was struggling with some of like the child custody because he has younger children with his ex. And it wasn't a turn off to me, but it was definitely something that I didn't think I wanted to let affect my life, if that makes sense. So we had a great time. We decided fairly early on that we're just gonna be friends. Through the holidays, like Christmas Eve was approaching, New Year's Eve was approaching, which is actually today. But as we were, developing our friendship and realized we weren't really like interacting with, with each other that much, I was just like, I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail right now. I'll go into that for the next episode. But I was also with him like, I've told you about my ex, I told you about CG. We ended up reconnecting, and I think I'm going to go ahead and just pursue that. And I was like, I don't think you and I were going to head to like a romantic kind of place anyway. And he was like, no. He was like, I get it. He was like, we've shared about our exes before, and we shared what our hopes and dreams are and where our paths are. Like, I get it. He was like, we can always be friends, but I understand if you're going to have your ex back in your life, you want to focus on that, and you don't want to be like hanging out with me. And I'm like, I get that. It's really cool. So then he was just like, I do have to tell you one thing though. He was like, I knew on the first date that you and I weren't going to end up as a couple, and we weren't going to end up together. And we, he was like, I knew we didn't have a future. He was like, I figured we'd go on a few dates. He was like, I figured, we'd have fun. He was like, but on that first date, he was like, girl, we went to a local pizza place that makes really fucking amazing pizza, by the way. And they put it on one of those like cute, like tall trays, like the platter. And then we had a couple sides, and we had a couple beers, of course. And then he was just like, I was talking because I think he's funny. So I was like laughing. I was just sitting there like listening, like just eating, which is something I never used to do before. But I think when CG broke up with me in September, eventually I started eating my feelings anyway. But he was just like, girl, I knew that we didn't have a future because you ate the whole fucking pizza. And he was like, I remember thinking, she's not fat. He was just like, but I remember thinking, who the fuck could afford to take this girl out on a regular basis with the amount of fucking pizza that she eats. It's fucking hilarious. Anyway, so even though we spent a lot of time together and we became very familiar and we had that familiarity within our friendship, it was pretty clear. Pretty clear that we weren't a love connection. I was focused on like just his life with his custody issues, and he was focused on the amount of pizza that I can eat. It was hilarious. Anyway, but he was a great sport, and he did send me a great bottle of Bullet as like a thank you and good luck with your ex kind of thing. And I will forever be grateful for that, because it was a great gesture and it was a great way to end my dating life. And I do have to say, familiarity is definitely important. It's definitely something for you to focus on within your relationships. And if you ever have any questions, I'm going to end the podcast, but I'm going to keep my podcast going, and I'm going to keep my Instagram for my podcast going. So if you ever need anything, always feel free to reach out to me. I will always be here for you. I'm a veteran. I love every branch. Army's obviously the shit. But if you're a veteran from another branch and you need help, fucking reach out to me. I will always be available for you. I'm just going to take a break from this podcast. And the next episode, the final episode, I'm going to go ahead and just explain more of what happened with CG and I. But in the meantime, fucking enjoy the pizza. Fuck everybody. Anyway, I hope you have a great new year. I hope it's healthy and happy and productive and safe and peaceful. And I hope your hangovers aren't too bad. And if they are, fuck, there's nothing like hair of the dog. All right. Love you guys.